Ano ai me ka vilina a ke aloha. Aloha kako. Aloha to one and all. As you join us here on the porch of the Eva Parker Woods Cottage, located in an area known as Kalahuipua'a, here along the South Kohala coast. In a place where over 23 years we shared a program called Twilight at Kalahuipua'a, featuring guest artists, musicians, hula dancers, and many people who would sit here on this bench along with us or in the rocking chair and share some of their mo'olelo, their stories, and their talents, the gifts that they've been given. And so we, in the spirit of Twilight, we're continuing it virtually and sharing our aloha with you all. And so something that we would like to continue. But as we always start our evenings here, we always would like to greet you in a very traditional Hawaiian way with an oli, with a chant. And this is a chant which is a welcoming chant, or called an oli aloha. O naunai tahala me talehua, he halelehua no ia nakano e. O ka uno ia e no ine e line oi, o taiti mai. Aloha e. And so we welcome you to Kalahuipua'a, to the home of the Mauna Lani Auberge Resort, and to a very, very special place for all of us and those fortunate to be here. This evening we are indeed fortunate to have a dear friend to join us here on this lanai of the Eva Parker Woods Cottage, and one who we've known and have been connected and have worked with over the many, many years, and who has so much to share. And I always say that one day I hope to be able to speak as eloquently as he does. But I'd like to welcome John DeFries to join my wife Anna and myself. And Anna's going to offer John a lei, maile. And in the tradition of offering of maile, the ends are brought together and entwined, as you see Anna doing so. And the lei represents the piko, the umbilical cord. As the Hawaiians believe that when entwined in the lei, that you make the spiritual connection between the giver and the receiver of the lei. And the kupuna would always add in that when you entwine the lei as such, that the love, the aloha in which the lei was given will not easily fall away. And so, John, it's so nice to have you join us here. Mahalo nui. And it's such a special treat to have you.
Well, thank you for calling me. Notwithstanding that the three of us live about a mile from one another,
Yeah.
and we have to come all the way to Kalahuipua'a, but thank you so much.
To be able to sit down and talk story.
Sit down and talk story, that shows how busy we all are. But thank you for, this place has many memories, certainly for me. And your family, the Akaka family, and my upbringing, Kaneala's Auntie Annie, older sister to his father, was actually my Sunday school teacher. And if you knew Auntie Annie, you understand that none of us in childhood got away with very much.
That's right.
Right?
She was the ultimate school teacher.
She was the ultimate school teacher, and I rely on her lessons even today. But thank you for being here, because the connection to Mauna Lani has direct connections to our family, the DeFries family. In the mid-1970s, the sister of my father, Auntie Emma DeFries, who was a renowned and respected kupuna of her time, and she and Kenneth Brown met. And at that time, Mauna Lani had nothing on it, no structures. The land was being planned for the master planned resort, but there was much preparation to do. And part of that centered around the Hawaiian cultural sites that are here on the grounds that have been preserved, as well as burial sites, which often you found close to the ocean. And Kenneth Brown was sensitive enough and knowledgeable enough to know that he needed help in this area, and turned to Homer Hayes at that time, and also to
yes.
Auntie Emma DeFries. And I'd like to recall one story, if I may.
Yes, please, please.
And the story goes back to the groundbreaking of the first vertical structure, the first building on these grounds. And that building was the Francis Brown Clubhouse at the golf course. Not unusual for a resort to begin its development around a golf course amenities. So on that morning, a groundbreaking, a ceremony, a cultural protocol had been planned. And leading up to that, people who know this project know that Mauna Lani was originally going to be called the Mauna Loa Resort. And in the documents that involved the planning and permitting of this project, there were references to the Mauna Lani Resort, the Mauna Loa Land Company, Mauna Loa Development. And so on this day, on this groundbreaking day, everybody gathered, the list of who's who on the island, and gathered to dedicate the building, the groundbreaking of that building. And on that morning, the summits of 5 mountains were visible, one of them being Mauna Loa, Hualalai, Haleakala, Kohala, and Mauna Kea. And in an inspiration that came to Auntie Emma in a dream, she recognized that the presence of the summits of 5 mountains indeed marked a special moment. And later when I spoke to her, she said that the message was that it would be inappropriate when all 5 summits had appeared to name it after only one. And so in that moment, in that dedication, in that ceremony, the name Mauna Lani was born. And it was a name that came to her previously in a dream, and the presence of the summits of the 5 mountains signaled to her why that name came to her as inspiration and why that name belonged here. Mauna Lani, according to her mana'o, is really the vortex, the pico, if you will, the navel of the spiritual energy that radiates from the summits of each of these mountains. And so in that name, she dedicated and really consecrated a very special place with a very special purpose. And it was to her good fortune that the chairman of the board of Mauna Lani at that time was Kenneth Brown, whose own family teachings made him understand the importance of that moment.
And whose uncle, Francis E. Brown, once owned this land, this property with the fish ponds and the area where our hotel is,
Yes,
from 1932 all the way up to 1972.
yes. So, and throughout his life, I came to know Kenneth Brown very well, and while I was not at the blessing itself, I spent a considerable amount of time with Auntie Emma and had a chance to talk to her about this naming inspiration, and then in later years spent much time talking to Mr. Brown about it. In fact, in 1981, if the camera can pick this up closely, this is an oil painting by a renowned artist from Kona, Ed Caton, who did this representation of Auntie Emma. And he was inspired to paint her in green. And if you look at her hands, and if anyone who's watching this who knew her will understand that this painting captures kind of her mana and her spirit and, her life force. This was given to actually Waimea's Harry Ruddle of Kona. And when he received it, saw it, felt it, turned to me and gave it to me and said, "This belongs to your family." And so a couple of years ago, I happened to come pay a visit to Anna and Kaniala, and I presented this and asked them if they would place this in the cottage here for all to enjoy, but also it's actually where Auntie Emma belongs.
And we believe that she's the guardian here at night. Anyone who looks through these windows and sees her in there would certainly have great respect for this place. Well, thank you for sharing that story on how the name Mauna Lani came to be. And as you shared, that the name came in a dream. In Hawaiian, these kind of dream names are called inoa po. And the Hawaiians believe that if a name comes in that way spiritually through a dream, that it's a name that has to be given. Whether it's a resort in this case, or whether it's a child, or whatever it might be. But this is the only resort that I know that has an Inoapo, has a very special spiritual name, Mauna Lani, in reference to the sacred mountains that surround us, the heavenly mountains.
She carried a very, when you were in the presence of Auntie Emma, you knew you were in the presence of an old soul, right? And you saw it in her eyes. But she was also a little bit of a rascal, right? Just kolohe, what the Hawaiians call kolohe. And our family is filled with kolohe, uncles and aunties, actually. But, I often think about what it would have been like at that groundbreaking, at that blessing, when this naming took place. If I was the marketing executive for the resort, how stunned I would have been. At that point, they probably had their business cards done,
everything
all of the
printed up.
stationery. This was on its way to becoming the Mauna Loa, beach hotel. And all of a sudden, this woman in undoubtedly a red kikepa is chanting and changes the name in the spot. So, but it was her responsibility. And I guess, one of the things I would say to people in the visitor industry or in our communities, especially those of cultural expertise, what she did that day took a lot of confidence and a lot of courage and a sense of purpose and identity. And she felt responsible to make that pronouncement.
Well, that that's such an interesting story behind the inception of this resort and the name, which the names always give prominence and strength and spirit to a person, to a place. and something that this resort lives up to. And, you know, Auntie also was a composer too. And, you know, she wrote a beautiful song, which I've heard over the years by the group Olomana. Beautiful song, very simple song. I haven't really committed the words to memory, but I do have the words here in my ukulele, and I thought that maybe we take this moment and honor Auntie Emma by singing her song. And I'll have to look at the words while I sing this, but if any of you out there viewing this have your instruments with you, sing along with me a song called E Ku'usweet Puina Ole, in reference to my sweet, unforgettable lei. E ku'usweet lei Puina Ole Lenani I ka vekiu and never fading bloom ya e ku'usweet lei Puina Ole ku'upua kulei nani mai ole ke ola maulua e ku'ulei ke kali aku nei ya e ku'usweet Puina Ole e ho'i mai ka hauala e pili e ku'usweet lei Puina Ole.
Auntie Emma.
E ku'usweet lei Puina Ole.
Beautiful composition.
Mahalo, Auntie Emma.
Beautiful song.
Well, you know, John, over the years that we've known each other and worked together and did so many things, you've worn many hats, did many things representing the islands, the people of Hawaii. And in your position now, I want to congratulate you as in your new position as CEO for the Hawaii Tourism Authority and being actually the first Hawaiian in that position. So congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Most of my friends think my head should be examined. But you know, it was an inspiration. My predecessor offered his resignation in June. That would become effective in August. And I actually, when I heard about the resignation, my thoughts went immediately to one or two candidates who I thought would do well in what became an extensive competition, right? There were more than 300 applicants for the job worldwide, and in the end, they picked the oldest white-haired guy that I think in there. But
They made a good choice, the right
yes,
choice.
a wise choice.
But you know, the inspiration came, and my wife Ginny and I talked about it, and we love our life here in Kona. Taking the position would require relocating in part to Honolulu. And so it was a decision we had to make together, and once we made it, and I moved forward with the application, it was really interesting because in my life, I've never done a resume. You know, and the prerequisite of applying for a job is you got to do a resume. And so this young Hawaiian couple, Kirsten Kahaloa and Ilihia.
Yes.
Yeah. Kirsten heard me say to Ginny, well, I've never done a resume, I'll just slap one together. And Kirsten said, you don't slap one together. You know, you actually, you know, have to do it. And she had experience in that, in higher education administration. So she said, just send me the content of everything you've done, and then I'll format it.
Oh.
And we'll create
nice.
this application. So that's how it started. And then under education, you know, I was fortunate to go to Punahou School, right, and graduate. But I went to the University of Hawaii for like 3 semesters, and when I dropped out, I had more parking tickets than credits. Right? So I told her, I said, take University of Hawaii off the resume. I don't want to deal with it. I don't have a degree. And she said, okay. And when it came back, she had Jefferson Elementary on it instead. I said, how many chief executive resumes have you seen with your elementary school listed? And she said, none. But that's not the point. The point is that you want the selection committee to know that you were born and raised in Waikiki, the mecca of Hawaii tourism. You went to grade school there. And that's not only Waikiki Beach, but that's the fishing grounds of your ohana. Yeah. And you need to claim all of that. So we did it. And I guess she was right, because in the end, you know, and you learn a lot about yourself. I will tell you that all the way through the process, I thought about Kenneth Brown. In particular, the last interview. You know, they went from 300 plus candidates to 9 to 4 to 2 to 1. Okay, and in the finals, when it was narrowed down to 2, a friend of mine called. You know him, Mark McGuffey.
Oh yes.
Mark called me, asked me how I was feeling about going into the final interview, and I said, Mark, I feel like this is the final round of a golf match, and I have to shoot 5 under to win. So I got to keep the ball in the fairway. I got to hit the green in regulation, and I got to putt well. I got to read the putts. And Mark said, Mark was a former general manager of
And who helped us
Mauna Lani.
kick off
And
Twilight at
who helped start
Kua'a.
Twilight.
Yes, you're right.
So Mark said to me, wow, you got that figured out that way? That's what you're seeing? I said, yeah. I said, and the last thing, Kenneth Brown is my caddy. And he's seen this course before. So that's kind of the you know, when people talk about visioning something and projecting, that actually is the vision I took into the final interview, was that I knew I was with a spiritual caddy who was very wise. And
Yes.
yeah.
And Uncle Kenny Brown was truly a guiding light for yourself and for
Many of
me
us.
and for many
Yeah.
people. Many people.
But you know, John, I can't help but think that that your resume had to really be pared down from the volumes of work and experience that you've had. People have degrees from different institutions, but you have volumes of experience in the industry and business.
You know, I am a sponge for knowledge, even though academically I didn't excel. I was fortunate to have an incredible array of mentors. And I think what was helpful, what was about the resume process was it was very cathartic for me because it forced me to focus on every job I had, which then caused me to remember every mentor I had. And in some way pause and thank them, you know, and many of them are no longer with us, right? Including Antiema, including Kenneth Brown. And so it was, very healing and revealing process to go through and give thanks because those mentors recognized something in me and challenged me at times to do things. So, to that degree, I'm extremely grateful. I mean, when you think about when you're around visionaries, especially, right? Like Antiema was visionary, Kenneth Brown was visionary, Francis Brown was visionary, Noboru Goto, the Japanese industrialist who first invested, was a visionary, right? When you're around visionaries, what I found is when they say something or they assert something that will happen, you don't really know if it means it's going to happen tomorrow, next week, or 25, 30 years from now. And in particular with Mr. Brown, with Kenneth Brown, many of the seeds that he planted here at Kalahuipua'a, here at Mauna Lani, I can see those seeds now germinating in terms of ideas. When he understood fully what the name Mauna Lani meant and the significance of the 5 mountains, right? Haleakala, Kohala, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, Hualalai. He internalized that the same way one would do the Olympic rings, the 5 Olympic rings. That he actually believed that they represented coordinates to go from the pico, from the navel, truly the pico of the Pacific, and project outward to the world through the 5 mountains, through the summits of the 5 mountains. So Kenneth Brown was a very knowledgeable person in developed as an architect primarily. But he was also very esoteric, and in one conversation, we could be in the cosmos, and in the next conversation, we could be on this bench. He had that capacity, you know, and so that kind of stuff fascinated me. And this global vision for Mauna Lani, that the role the Kohala Coast, that Mauna Lani, that the 5 mountains would play in helping this world find itself, is even becoming more evident to me today, given the state of the world, right? And so those of you who may be familiar with the annual conference in Switzerland called Davos, at Davos, Switzerland, where it's the World Economic Forum, when world leaders and the brightest thinkers and philanthropists gather to focus on issues related to the world's economy. Mr. Brown actually envisioned something like that happening here, right? That would bring people of different disciplines. He felt like politicians needed to spend more time with poets and musicians and authors, and that everybody was living in a silo and therefore had little appreciation for how expansive knowledge was and how expansive the world was. And so I'm beginning to see now early that Kalahuipua'a, Mauna Lani, and Kohala Coast will actually become and evolve in relatively short order into becoming the Davos of the Pacific. This time, not the world economy as a focus, but the sustainability of the planet. Guided by modern technology and science, merged with traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom. And that convergence is emerging. And now from my office and my responsibilities at HTA, Hawaii Tourism Authority, I can see more clearly the path, the purpose, and the vision that Mr. Brown and NTM together helped to forge. So, so to say I'm excited is an understatement.
And you, as you had mentioned that right where we're at, here at the cottage, many seeds were planted here, including an organization that we were part of, and just a small group of us sitting here at this round table outside of this lanai, the Naha, which
Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association,
which was founded by Kenneth Brown, and George Kanahele.
Yeah. And it led to the creation of Friends of the Future, which is now based in Waimea.
That's right.
Right.
Friends of the
So,
Future. Yes.
The Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association, he and Dr. George Kanahele created because they felt that the largest industry had to become keepers of the culture. And in so doing, the culture would become the keeper of tourism, right? And so they set out putting this nonprofit together. They went around town and they just named about 12 of us Hawaiians in the business and said, you're on the board, you're on the board, you're on the board. And we started that back in, I think, 96. And with the express purpose of bringing Hawaiian cultural values in as a framework for leadership development, business development, and to help guide and shape the future of Hawaii's largest industry. And to say the least, when I was selected as president and CEO of the Tourism Authority, I owe a lot of gratitude to Dr. Kanahele and Kenneth Brown. But there again is an example of visionaries seeing something, a young kid like me at the time, wondering, is this going to happen next week, next month? Only for it to happen 25 plus years later, right? And so, and with Friends of the Future, this image, this vision of Davos of the Pacific, or the coming together of world leaders here on the Kohala Coast, hubbed here at Mauna Lani, comes from conversations around the table here at this cottage, where he launched 4 conversations in a think tank. At the time, this is 93, Kenneth Brown, besides having his own business practice as an architect and businessman, was the board chairman of Bishop Museum, the East-West Center, Queens Health Systems, the largest health system in Hawaii, the Mauna Lani Resort, and what was then Oceanic Cable, or what is today Spectrum, the cable, right?
Communications,
And so, and he was a big supporter of the Polynesian Voyaging Society. The East-West Center, where he was chair of the Board of Governors, is really the extension of the U.S. State Department in Hawaii for the Pacific, Asia-Pacific region. So when you think about a board chairman that is sitting on top of institutions of that magnitude, right? You have to be an individual that has a very fluid and nimble and creative and innovative mind. And so his ability to see from the pinnacle of those institutions and then integrate all the missions, right? Integrate Hawaiian culture, integrate the greatness of Polynesian voyages, integrate the U.S. State Department and its functions, right? So when he gathered the think tank here, he launched 4 conversations. Kapiko Lokahi, which was a roundtable of Native Hawaiians looking at the future of Hawaiian culture and traditional practices. He had one chaired by Dr. Earl Bakken on health and wellness, right? Which was the precedent for what became the North Hawaii Community Hospital, right? Tutu's House, a non-clinical resource center for the community, and that. So you had Kapiko Lokahi, health and wellness. The third one was the Center for a Sustainable Future. It was chaired at the time by Dr. Barry Raleigh, who headed the School of Ocean and Earth Sciences at the University of Hawaii. And the last one was the Dialogue of Civilizations that was chaired by then East-West Center President Victor Howell Lee. And every one of these meetings that we had in every one of these groups had no agenda. It was something I had never seen, but Kenny just thought that people should get together, get to know one another, and just free-form your way into creating something.
And I remember one of those meetings, Lawrence Rockefeller came here to join in to that
Oh, no,
group.
he had an outstanding group of people, and I happened to be fortunate not only to be part of that, but he actually asked me to sit in on all four of those sessions, right? Typically, you'd sit in one group, and then you'd work it out among your group, but he invited me to sit in all four, and I will tell you that that my whole kind of mode of operating is shaped by that process, when you think about it. And that's why it's at this stage of my life, I can kind of begin to see what he saw 20 plus years ago. And he called it the global village back then.
Yes.
Right? And
I recall that.
and so I feel kind of responsible to helping to manifest that vision, because this island, think about its geology and think about its topography, right? On one island, we have every climactic zone on the planet except polar tundra and Sahara desert. We have everything else in between. Experts tell me that if you go from Canada to South America, they're not sure that you get as many climactic zones, right? So you have that as kind of a vertical axis. And then we have a relationship with the core of the planet, which expresses itself through the volcano, right? And the magma and the lava. And then we have the world's preeminent portal to the universe on Mauna Kea. So we have this incredible vertical axis, the portal to the universe, the core of the planet. Horizontally, we have every climactic zone except polar tundra and Sahara Desert. And then you overlay the Polynesians who settled first and the migration of every different culture that has contributed to our Kama'aina way of life, right? And what we have here is an incredible laboratory, a living laboratory to experiment on improving cross-cultural relations, on developing renewable technologies, of looking at the future through regenerative eyes, so that 3 generations from now, they have natural resource base that is in better shape than it is today, right? So that they can flourish during their time. And again, that will happen because modern science, modern technology becomes integrated with traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom. You cannot live on an island that has more than 400 names for clouds and more than 300 names for rain, and think that Hawaiians were passive about knowledge. I often joke that if you were a weatherman back then and you said tomorrow morning will be partly cloudy, you would be dismissed from the island. You better know the name.
of
of
all
what
those
that call.
rains and the winds,
Yes.
the very
And by
various winds.
naming each of the rains, you would know exactly which district it was going to be from.
would know, and you'd be able
what
to
the weather
smell
would
it.
be like.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right? So that kind of precision, when we start facing things like climate change on the planet, right? Sea level rise. This will take us back to all of these names, right? That all are personalities because the natural elements were ohana, or family, to us, right? As people. And Hawaiians, Native Hawaiians are in a position to elevate the stature of Native intelligence and indigenous knowledge, and so that other indigenous people will be heard too. Because in their places on the planet, they know the rain, they know the wind, right? And they know the seasons. And they know how to sustain life.
Yes.
And that's the challenge we face on the planet right now. Therefore, tourism really becomes, for me, and I learned, this from Nainoa Thompson, our friend and navigator, right? He said to me, John, what if we started looking at visitors as students and Hawaii as the school? Think about that when you move into tourism, he said. And he is a student of Kenneth Brown too, right? And I said, Nainoa, that's a great idea. I said, what do we teach them? And he said, malama, right? The Hawaiian cultural value, which means to protect, to nurture,
To preserve.
to preserve, right? So our canoe went around the world in 2014 to 2017 on a voyage of Malama Honua to care for island Earth, right? And Nainoa's point was, when visitors come here, they need to see living examples of us, the host. Malama our land, Malama Aina, Malama our oceans, Malama o Kekai, Malama one another, right? And we need to teach the visitor how to Malama us, right? How to walk softly, how to walk respectfully, how to learn how to be invited into special places, right? And move away from this model of mass tourism and back toward the renewed art of Hawaiian hospitality, which is all of what Twilight at Kalahuipoa is about.
Yes.
So I'll be quiet then, so hospitably you and Anna can sing another song.
Oh gosh. Well,
We're always mesmerized by your intellect and the sharing that you have, and really helping us to remember and realize the amazing and extraordinary vision that our ancestors had, our kupuna had, for this island state, these islands and these lands that they lived on and within, and how they really were so very in touch with their environment, and to the point of naming every wind, every rain, every cloud, not just so it would define its characteristics just by the name of the rain. You would know its characteristics and its
Yes.
location.
You better be precise.
yes. Well, as you were sharing about all the things that Kenny Brown helped to guide here in Hawaii and all the different foundations and institutions, it was always special to have Uncle Kenny, Auntie Joan Brown out there in the audience. And, as much as they could, they tried to come every month to join us at this Twilight event, which hosted many, many people here, all out in front of the cottage. But I would always invite him up to share a story or to share a memory, and certainly to share a song or two. And one of the songs that he loved doing was a song written as a gift for his Uncle Francis E. Brown of an estate which is just south of here in North Kona, a place called Keawaiki. And so he would always break out into that song, and we'd sing along with him. And to the delight of everyone who was so fortunate to be there. So we'll do that song, Kiava Iki, in honor of Uncle Kenny Brown and Auntie Joan Brown, who just recently celebrated her birthday.
On January 2nd.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
what a beautiful woman.
yes.
Yeah.
So the song Kiava Iki. Hey la, he kono loa amai Kiava Iki. E kipa e nanea a e ho'ola kanaka e pahaina ai ho i me yakini ke ki aloha Hawaii e puna hele ho i oe na mako he nani a he olu i ono i aho me ka e kai i laila oe e ola hai ke ki aloha Hawaii he puna hele hoi oe nā mako. Hei la, he kono loa amai Kiava Iki. E kipa e nanea a e ho'ola hukanaka. E pahaina ai ho i me ai yakini. Ke ki aloha Hawaii he puna hele ho i oe nā mako he puna hele ho i oe nā mako he puna hele ho i oe nā mako. And with this song, it's a beautiful rainbow arching from the
Beautiful rainbow
heavens and
coming up
touching the
between the
sea.
3 palm trees there, fronting the Mauna Lani Auberge
Yeah.
Hotel.
We've had so many good
Beautiful.
memories here.
Oh, you guys go all out, man.
I think
What
Dad's here.
a budget you must have.
Well, and it's the magic of this place.
The rainbow appears.
The
and
rainbow appears.
That's beautiful.
Oh, so those are wonderful, fun times.
You know, Kenneth Brown, too, avid golfer, Hawaii Golf Hall of Fame, right? Francis Brown, accomplished golfer. And so between 1995 and 2000, Mr. Brown asked me to represent the resort in its contract with the senior skins game. It was the golf,
Yeah, oh,
right?
yes, yes.
Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus,
Right.
Lee Trevino, and Ray Floyd were big then. And so we used to come up during those years. Hale Irwin was part of it. And I
Titi
remember
Rodriguez.
we brought Don Ho one year to play,
Oh, yes.
to play in the Pro-Am. And so Kenny brought Don to the cottage, and it happened to be a night of twilight as well. So yeah, so many great
That
memories.
was so funny that evening because Uncle Kenny was on the porch and he leaned over to Danny and he said, Kaniela, call up Uncle Don. And we, you know, as we looked out into the audience, the people gathered here, it was dark. You couldn't really see anything. He said, Uncle Don, are you there? Can you come up?
Not knowing which Uncle Don it was.
And lo and behold, Don Ho walks up
Yeah.
to the porch.
Yeah.
That was a special night to have Don come up the stairs and stand right here, right under one of our
Kerosene lanterns.
kerosene lanterns.
At Kukui Helepo.
And for the next maybe 45 minutes, I think, it just mesmerized everyone. And people out there in the audience said, is that the real Don Ho? And of course, you know, he sang some old Hawaiian songs that I've never heard him sung before. But of course, someone in the audience had said, Tiny Bubbles. And he turned to me and said, you know, I can't stand that
I
song,
hate
but it's
that
made me
song, man."
millions. And so, of course, he sang that song. And I think he did the Hawaiian wedding song. But just what a special night that was,
That was a
having
special
Don
night.
home. Uncle Don.
In fact, when we were in that pro-am, and Mr. Brown came to me and said, we pay all this money to get the best senior golfers in the world here. He said, if you go on the golf course right now, the largest gallery is around Don Ho. He said, why don't we just bring up Don Ho every year? And so we did. We actually did for a couple of years. And Don was my mother's high school classmate, class of 49 at Kamehameha, and became a very dear friend. I mean, we spent a lot of time with him over the years. Yeah. I'll tell you, he had this persona that was very laid back and hang loose and all. But, few people know he was a jet pilot.
Air Force
in the
fighter
Air Force.
pilot, yes.
He was a staunch historian on military history, and was quite a guy and a wise person. But he said something to me in 1975, so I would have been 24. He said, John, as you mature in business in Hawaii, you'll learn that there's two types of people: permanent and temporary. And there's nothing wrong with temporary people. They bring new ideas. They often bring new sources of capital. He said, but for too long, Hawaii's been dominated by temporary people with temporary thinking. And it's not their fault. Permanent people like you and me have to elevate our capabilities, elevate our game, and be able to compete in business or in life, face-to-face, toe-to-toe. And when we do that, we take kuleana, we take our responsibility to malama our own home and malama our own homeland. And so, I think about him a lot as well. And just so grateful. I count him among, the many mentors I would refer to before.
And so people like Don Ho and Uncle Kenny Brown, George Kanehele, many people in your life had really kind of prepped you, perhaps unknowingly, even though they maybe sometimes pull you by the collar, not by the ear, but by the collar, but to guide you in their way to prep you for what you're doing now in a very amazing position to help guide our tourism. And certainly this past year was quite not the usual year.
Devastating.
2020 was very
And
very unprecedented, to say the least.
Over my career, I've been through a lot of crises, right? And people my age have been through it in tourism in Hawaii. The United Airlines strike, the DC-10 groundings, 9/11, the Gulf War, the financial crisis of 2008. But each one of those crises, we eventually hit the floor, we hit the bottom, and then we start climbing back up, right? This one, like 11 months later, we're still falling. And that's a different type of crisis. It produces different types of challenges. And actually, it was the crisis that was a big inspiration for me to want to lead HTA and be in a position to help stabilize it and then lead the recovery that lays ahead. But this is a very challenging time for our communities, our local people, our industry, our small business, and we've got a ways to go. But I also have tremendous confidence in the resilience of our people, And when you see a rainbow like that, it restores your faith, energizes your faith in Keakua.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So all the, to that part of the world that we cannot see that is divine. So, but we can certainly feel it.
Yeah. Well, there's an old Hawaiian saying, "A'ali'i ku makani," and a'ali'i is a native plant that you find in the upper areas of the island, and which certain times of the year, you know, they have beautiful, colorful bracts, which we used to make leis, or the cowboys of Paniolos would make leis with. But A'ali Ikumakani refers to a plant that's very resilient to the very strong makani, the strong winds of those areas that it grows, and that as much as the wind can blow that, bend the branches of that plant, but it always comes back. It's always very resilient, which is really a metaphor for what we're going through today,
Yeah.
and that resilience and being able to bend with the wind and with this pandemic, but being able to come back, to
Yeah.
bounce back again.
Yeah, we have the wherewithal to do this as a community. We're going to need to unify and accomplish a lot in a relatively short time. So, yeah, I'm fortunate and grateful to be where I'm at.
And I think that, you know, as the kupuna say, there's no accidents in life. Things happen because it's meant to have happened, and there's a great master plan that we may not all know, but that our lives are led on these paths, in this huaka'i, this journey, which leads us to what we end up doing in life. And certainly you have been guided well to where you are now, and I think and I understand and believe that it was meant to be, and we're all fortunate that you are
thank
have been
you.
the chosen one for that very special position.
Thank you. You know, and I speak about mentors, and I omit too often to acknowledge the beautiful parents I had, Kawehiwehi Onalani and Ho'ike Hunalani were their Hawaiian names, and beautiful grandparents on both my mother's side and my father's side. And so very loving family, very strict family, but very loving, and so grateful to their mentorship as well and their love.
Now, John, you mentioned that you grew up in Waikiki. That's a very unusual place for someone to be growing up when you think in today's terms of how it's the mecca of tourism and hotels and condominiums. But
You know, but back then it was a neighborhood, right? My grandfather had an emu in the front yard, and the cars would pass about 5 feet away, and yeah, it was a great place to grow up. You know, just a great place. So much variety, so much, and so I feel very much at home when I have to go there for my work at HDA. I'm happy to come home to Kona to regain my sanity and then go back, you know, next week as well. So again, but thank you so much for having me here.
Well, thank you for joining us and for sharing your story, your huaka'i, your journey, and we just know that we are here to kako'o, to support and to kokua you, help you in whatever way we possibly can. And
You know what's the best? The smell of maile and limu, seaweed at the same time.
oh, yes.
Makamakai.
That's right. You have the fragrance of the uplands and the ocean as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, I thought that maybe we close with this song that, you know, and knowing that the rainbow is still there. You know, my dad, whether he was up at the U.S. Senate or wherever he may have been, he always took the message of Hawaii with him and aloha. And he used to love to sing this song, which he called the Rainbow Song, although it had another name, the Hawaiian Lullaby. And I thought this might be a nice song to
Beautiful.
close our Talk Story evening with, as we enjoy that beautiful rainbow as it touches from the heavens to the sea. And I want to also invite Ginny to come in. Come and sit here, Ginny. Ginny is John's wife, and usually she's in the background. But I want to come, Ginny, come. And we come join, sit in this chair, and I'm gonna.
You need to
sit
put your
here.
mask on.
I will throw my money to you. Come here. Come sit down and join us. Join us as we.
I have
share this.
okay, yeah. I had an idea. Let her sit with John, and then you can
Okay.
just go ahead and sit
Okay,
with John,
we
and then
can
we'll
do
just
that.
and
And
then
I'll
we'll
move
just
this
switch this over
microphone.
here.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Just moving around a little
Right
bit.
here.
Quick shift. You want to sit?
Okay. No, I'll stand.
Oh, okay. That case.
Okay.
I'll just move this to the side.
What's that? Oh, the
And so
rainbow.
this song that speaks of Hawaii and its rainbows and the beautiful rainbow of people here in the islands. Where I live, there are rainbows with life in the laughter of mornings and starry nights. Where I live, there are rainbows with flowers full of color and birds filled with song. I can smile when it's raining and touch the warmth of the sun. I hear children laughing in this place that I love. Where we live, there are rainbows with life in the laughter of mornings and starry nights.
Mahalo, Ginny and John.
Mahalo, John,
Thank
and
you.
to
Oh,
Ginny
thank you.
for
Thank you.
joining us here at the Eva Parker Woods Cottage. Mahalo for all of you out there who join us on our virtual talk story. Mahalo to our beautiful Mauna Lani Auberge Resort Hotel and Mauna Lani Resort in Kalahuipu'a for allowing us to be here to share this time in this moment with you. Until we meet again, we want to say ahui ho malamapono. Until we meet again, to take care of yourself, as my tutu would say, malamakikino. Take care of your health and your body. So from all of us to all of you out there, mahalo, anui loa,
Aloha.
and aloha.